All right, well, all right, folks. Well, it's 3 o'clock, and so why don't we just go ahead and get started here. I know that acutely aware of the fact that we are literally the last obstacle between you and the happy hour. So we're going to try to get you out of this as efficiently as possible, and hopefully, if you learn something along the way, all the better, right? But so I want to quickly talk about what it is we're going to be doing today. Our session was titled, quite simply, Stuff That Worked, right? So we want to really talk with you about, not about methodologies or diagrams or approaches or anything like that, but actual projects, stuff that actually happened in the state and what the real outcomes were. So what we hope to do here is, give you some real takeaways, lessons learned, actual activities, stuff that actually worked, right? And in the course of this too, we hope to spur some conversation. So in the course of these discussions, if you have any questions, concerns, anything that you would like us to elaborate on, please feel free, because roughly half the time that we've got set up here was dedicated to Q&A. So definitely invite you guys to be as interactive and inquisitive as possible. Okay. So I do want to quickly introduce my partners in crime here. First, we've got Jamie Mangrum, who up until very recently was the CIO over Department of State Hospitals. He's now with SAS. And Jamie's going to be talking about a very unique project that they did over at state hospitals that was had a number of unique challenges, just in terms of the type of project, the number of stakeholders, and so forth. But had a lot to talk about in terms of the success and ultimately getting that project going. Also with me today is Chad Crowe, who's the CIO of Cal HR. And Chad's going to be talking about the ECOS project, one that I would say is maybe more typical of your typical state software IT projects, but one in which there were some struggles. And so Chad's going to elaborate a bit on what those struggles were, something that probably a lot of us are familiar with, but more specifically how they traversed those struggles and got the project back on track. So we really want to spend some time talking about not only a success story, but also one in which there were some challenges and how they got through those. Okay. So without any further ado here, why don't we go ahead and start with Jamie. Jamie's going to be talking today about the personal duress alarm system. So why don't I go ahead and hand it off to you, Jamie, and just prompt me when you're ready to transition over.
Okay. So I came into state hospitals in 2010, and it was right after something that normally a CIO or a project manager doesn't have as a catalyst for one of their projects. Psych tech at our Napa State Hospital was actually murdered by a patient. And the reason was at each of our hospitals, they had 4 or 5 different types of alarm systems. There was no coverage in the outdoor campus areas, and so we were tasked with working with the staff to basically design and come up with a new type of alarm system that basically gave campus-wide coverage, at all of our hospitals. And some of the hospitals, that's a significant issue, because you're talking about campuses that are like a college. They're in the neighborhood of like 450 acres, so it was staggering, the size of the project. We ended up buying an off-the-shelf product that each of the staff wore and are wear today, and I think we've deployed to almost 10,000 employees statewide, and they wear it around their neck and they're able to pull on it, and at any given time it'll then tell everybody in the same zone that an alarm has been triggered on their tag. And then it actually gives you the navigation information to quickly find the person who has triggered the alarm, as well as the police on the state hospital's campus and everyone else that's supposed to respond. And so we went from responses of literally being measured in multiple minutes down to turning everybody in the same local area as first responders down to seconds. We go ahead and go to the next. It was a project that when I came on board, they had deployed. There's a Breakaway lanyard, and ironically, we were supposed to be making it a safer environment, and the Breakaway lanyard could actually be used as an effective choking device. So that really didn't sit very well with the employees that we were rolling out to. And I walked onto a project where I actually had news channels and employees standing out there and demonstrating to the news channels how I was effectively teaching the patients how to strangle them effectively. I was equated to the cigarette industry in the 1950s. It was really kind of a contentious environment. We actually invented a new type of lanyard that we deployed. But just like any large-scale IT project, when we did deploy, there's over 10,000 components that were supposed to work together well. And no matter how much testing you do, there are going to be problems and issues. And there were. And what we discovered was no one had ever prepared the customer for that. And so I'd go into these town halls, and people would start yelling at me, and they would say, when I drive a car off the showroom floor, I expect it to work. And it was very evident that we had not done proper messaging. We had not basically set expectations at the beginning of the project. So these folks actually had unrealistic expectations. The communications we were doing were not the best they could be, and so on. So we started really retooling how we were communicating with people. And we took basically the statements that they were saying to us about consumer grade technology and supposed to just be flawless, and starting to basically give analogies that were more appropriate. We would say things like, it's more like you ordered all the components of a car and had it drop shipped to your front lawn, and then you had a team dispatched to basically assemble it. And oh, by the way, you've added in a couple dozen custom components that have never been put in this car. And so it's going to be a while before it works exactly the way you expect it to. So we designed this lanyard. We did all these different things, and it was all basically out of lessons learned. You can go ahead and go to the next. Oh, okay. And as we went to the next hospitals, lessons learned would be rolled into those. So we would start, like as an example, a town hall, and we would basically say, the first day we go live, you're going to have problems. You're going to probably have quite a few problems. It's our responsibility to capture these as quickly and to work through and resolve them. We started doing a lot more marketing, a lot more communications with staff, and so on. One of the things that we had that was a problem is the system tracks the location of every single employee. Unionized employees actually kind of had an issue with that because they believed, and it can be used for punitive, where you can actually monitor employee performance. Like, why were you sitting in the bathroom for the past hour? Why are you, over here doing this when you're supposed to be at your workplace, and so on. And so one of the things we had to do was actually negotiate with the unions and write policies where we would actually protect the data and prohibit it being used in that fashion, primarily because we didn't want the staff to obstruct its use. It was far more important that the system be used what it was intended for, which is a safety and security system, than for HR related activities to occur. We would send to each of the next hospitals teams from the prior hospitals and sit down and do lessons learned briefings before they would ever launch. It's not very often you get projects where you have, you do a successful implementation here and then you actually get to go and do it at multiple locations. So every time you make a mistake, you document that and then you learn from it, and hopefully you don't make those same mistakes again, going forward. And we found those to be, those types of efforts and so on were highly effective, and able to make us a lot more successful in the coming hospitals. Let's see what else. Complex deployments. We also found that we had to be very adaptive. Just like any project, you make a lot of assumptions going into it. We found going into each one of our hospitals, which are, some of them were built 10 years ago versus 1854, what you find in walls and things like that are completely different. Saturation of wireless technology and so on. So we would make assumptions going forward, but like I said, we would go in and then confirm those assumptions and then adapt. We would learn from one hospital that if you have 6-foot tall stone walls, there's a reason why people use those as radiation shelters. They're not very conducive to having wireless technology permeate them as well. And so you end up having to spend a heck of a lot more money on different wireless technologies and so on to do that. So we also, one of the things I think that, and it's something we need to learn how to do in California that I think was very helpful, was we did, at the time of feasibility study on one of our hospitals, and we didn't do it for any of the remaining hospitals. It was not believed that we would be successful with the project to begin with. So we basically did that. And then once we were done with that hospital and actually were successful, we then started doing our marketing. And we would bring in members of finance, the ledge analyst's office, legislative staffers, people like that. And we'd actually bring them out to the hospital and show that this actually was a success. Have them walk the campus, let them in an unfettered fashion, talk to the end users, the people that are actually wearing these devices. And what we found then was when we went forward and asked for the monies for the remaining 4 large hospitals, they were far more supportive. It was a much easier road. And, and basically that. It was a much better start small, build big type of approach, a much better way of approaching projects and so on. And as a result, state hospitals now has basically adopted that as a model for basically everything that they do. They break their projects up into multiple projects and multiple funding sources, and will do one and then basically prove that it's actually been a success. And they have found that, that sometimes to their own detriment, they actually get projects approved and funding, and then there's work that comes with that. But they have a tendency of being somewhat less risky because you've already been able to prove the concept that it is actually functional and in production. So.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Jamie. Really appreciate that. Since we do have a couple of minutes, I did want to just elaborate on one topic you mentioned, and that's the intricacies of the deployment itself, right? A lot of moving parts from a technical standpoint, literally and physically with, the Wi-Fi radio tech and so forth. In your role as the CIO, as, stakeholder for this project, what, in your opinion, would have been or what was the major things that you were looking for your project manager or project managers on this to kind of, to do or feed up to you, as a stakeholder in terms of managing those deployments? Was it in terms of just making sure all the pieces, parts, and dependencies were where they needed to be? Was it facilitating the communication? Was it being a subject matter expert in some of those aspects? What would be kind of your thoughts on that?
Not being a subject matter expert, I have a tendency of not wanting project managers that are subject matter experts because they have a tendency of not facilitating the decision-making process, but actually being active participants, and that'll cause problems. Primarily, though, was the facilitation of the communications throughout. There were so many different organizations that were involved in the design of what was eventually deployed, and then actually doing the implementation, working with facilities, and working with clinical staff as they would go into each of the different units, and they would actually displace, patients and things like that. So communications was huge. I mean, say probably about 85 to 90% of the role. And that was the primary skill that, with the project managers that we had, and it proved to be the most effective skill.
Excellent.
So.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that clarification. All right. While we move on to Chad, so Chad's going to be talking about the examination and certification online system. And I'll get my head out of my way here so that you can read it.
All right. So, in my previous life, prior to becoming the CIO at CalHR, I was a project manager in the state and in private, and before that I was a software engineer and programmer. So I've been around projects my whole professional career. It's all I know. So So I'm going to talk about the Examination Certification Online System, otherwise known as ECOS. Now this is CalHR's high priority project. It's been going on for quite some time. It's a 6-year project. It's a custom built solution. It's being built in-house by state staff. It's being led and managed by state staff. And we have some consultants that are supplementing, helping out with some of the programming and some of the requirements gathering. It is coming out in 4 phases. So about a third of the functionality is out now. So it's still in process. So you can look for next month, another third of it's going to be coming out. If you ever go to jobs.ca.gov, which I'm sure all of you probably have, we're going to be making updates to that. That's part of the ECOS project. So that'll be coming out end of January, so look for that. So in short, ECOS will be updating the way that the state does hiring. All state departments now use ECOS to handle the certs and eligibility lists. That's where you take an exam. Say you want to become a DPM3, you take an exam. You get scored. Hopefully you pass, and that score gets loaded up into ECOS, and that you get on the eligibility list there. The eligibility list is open for departments to come in and create certs off of. So they log into the system. They say I want a DPM3 in Sacramento, and it pulls back the list. And that's the 3 rank list. Everybody knows about 3 rank. So and it throws on top veterans, LEAP. Throws in as surplus or SROA on top of that. So then the departments start working that list. They create contact letters out of the system and they mail them, unfortunately, via snail mail. So that's how the system works today, and that's what they use it for. In January, you're going to see a new applicant side to it. So when you log into jobs.ca.gov, you'll have a new login. It'll be called Cal Career Account. And that you'll be able to upload applications and hold 3 applications up there. You can apply online now. You can receive and respond to contact letters electronically instead of through mail. You're going to be able to interact with the hiring managers. You'll be able to check on the status of your application, where it's at in the department. Statuses will be updated as far as your app. You'll be able to schedule interviews, take exams online, update your contact information. So you can see that the ECOS project now went public, where before it was internal to the State Department. So now we're reaching out to the public. So the scope of our project is now gone worldwide, basically. Department shops at that point will be able to post the job postings online in a template, a standard format, where today it's kind of all over the place. They'll be able to receive the contact letters and send them, and converse with the applicants as they go through the process. So I'm not here to sell ECOS, but it gives you an idea of the scope of what we're talking about here in this project. So to start this project, we had quite a few challenges. So I'm going to start, we're about a year into the project. At that point, the requirements were done, the design was completed, and we started coding on pages. Now we heard grumblings from the developers and from the QA staff. We were kind of ramping up, starting to write their QA scripts against the designs, that there were problems. So at that point, I came out of the project and took it over. So we decided to assess the project and figure out where is that. So what we found were that the requirements were ambiguous, very high level. There was no mid-level requirements, no detailed requirements whatsoever, documented, numbered, traceable at all. Basically, they had, system needs to be able to send an email. You know, not that a person needs to sign up for an alert and they do get emails when a job gets posted, you know, something like that. It was very, very high level. It was very, very scary, actually. And that was due to a rush and aggressive timeline. They didn't understand the complexity of the project, so when they did the timelines, you got 6 weeks to do the requirements, go. So it all came out that way. And same with the design. The design is the same way. It was rushed, it was an aggressive timeline, it was kind of thrown together. So what we saw were inconsistencies across pages, across the design. So again, you have 6 weeks to design this huge app, go. So we saw on one page a back button, where the next page was a cancel button, doing the same functionality, but called different things. For one page, the information about a person will be displayed one way, next page displayed another way. You know, links in different spots. So we saw all kinds of issues. We knew we were in trouble at that point. And on the technical side, it's the same thing. You know, every page, required field validations or issues or errors were all handled differently and per page. So if I had a first name editable field across several different pages, they're all validated and done separately instead of, you know, an enterprise architectural view. So obviously we had fundamental problems. So at that point we stopped. We stopped the design, we stopped the requirements. There are certain parts of coding we allowed to go forward. So they continued on parts of coding that we allowed because we knew, you know, is high level enough, that wasn't a big deal. So we allowed them to continue. So we attacked the requirements first, and we got them to a mid-level. So we kind of understood the complexity at this point and how long it would actually take to do the project. And so we can now project going forward our timelines, a real schedule. The designs, the inconsistent look and feel, we came up with something we called a standard design document. So it was about 20, 25 pages, and we came up with, you're going to use a cancel button, not a back button. So every page uses a cancel button to do this functionality. Your grids that display information, the grids, standard grids are going to be sortable. They're going to have a search on every field above them. You know, that kind of stuff. Something standard across. Your links are going to be on the right. So it was like 20, 25 pages of this. So we stopped and did all that. Similar to the technical side, architecture, we're going to do global validation on our fields. We're going to do global required field checks and error throwing. So we walked back through all the designs, updated them at that point, and same with the architecture. So obviously this was taking a long time to do and unplanned work. So that brings me to our budget and timeline challenges. So we were doing unscheduled work, and we underestimated the time and the cost to do the project and to finish out this app. So we wanted something that the state could use. We didn't want to just try and hide this and say, okay, we'll just do this piece and that piece, we'll stay within our time frame. And at the end, you really don't get anything out of it, right? It would really help. It's another project that, you know, succeeded, but really didn't. So we didn't hide it. We were upfront. We told them we're going to add 2 years to the project. We doubled the project budget, and we were honest. At that time, it was a rough time to do that because several large projects in the state were flipping over too. So we got the SPR approved to Department of Technology. We had to put it into BCP to be able to get the additional funding, and we had to go before the legislature and testify before the Senate and the Assembly. Like I said, in a volatile time. So we took a big beating on that. We got a yes in Assembly, no in Senate. Went to conference, and they ultimately gave us a yes with reporting behind us. Every quarter now we have to report. But the point of that is we wanted to do the right thing, get the project out right, get something that's good. So we took the hit up front. It was painful for 3-4 months, but at the end we got to take a deep breath and say, okay, we're back on track. We can actually do this project. We can deliver something that's good. All right, so we didn't hide it. Another, you know, we had a lot of challenges on this. I can go on and on. But another one we had was building trust with the relationships with the state departments and statewide deployment. So this was the third system that attempted to do this functionality and features. The second system actually got implemented for about 6 months and got pulled down. So departments had to go through all this training, start to use the system, and then it gets yanked down from them. And the system before that, the same thing. So now we're into this project and we have a SPR, Special Project Report. And, you know, it doesn't look good. Departments don't trust us. They don't think we're going to be able to deliver. You know, why would they? So we had a lot of repairing to do with our relationship. So what we did was we brought in the larger state departments with special scenarios, like CAL FIRE has special hiring scenarios. CDCR is large. They have a lot of special scenarios. So as we started up the project again, we started bringing them in. We gather our requirements, we do our design, but then we check with them. You know, if we brought them in constantly through that, it would take forever. So at the end, we say, this is what we have, this is what we're doing, what do you think? So they gave us a bunch of feedback. We make changes, bring them back in, bring in other departments, bring in the people, the squeaky wheels who we know are going to be out there complaining, who talk a lot, and, you know, have them come in and tell us what the challenges are and be honest with us. So we brought them right away too. We brought them all in, you know, throw it at us so we make sure we have everything covered. So we kept in constant contact. We visited their forums, their exam forums, ad hoc forums for personnel. We did workshops. We shared information. We had an online forum to give them information and talk back and forth with them with our business. We did over 20 to 25 presentations to SEIU, to the coalition, to DOR, to departments. So we constant communication. You know, let them know what's going on. Because I find if you communicate during a project and let people know that you're having problems or there are issues, and you explain why, usually they're understandable. But if you just go into a hole, a silo, and don't communicate, you know, that usually, it's not going to work out well for you, usually. So we try to keep that communication open. So as we got closer to go live, one of the best things we probably did, we got through QA, we got through the first round of UAT. At that point, we knew we kind of had a solid app. So we invited the state departments to come in and take a sneak peek, try it out and help us test it. So we did 3 or 4 rounds of that. The first rounds they came in, we had a huge, we had a week long of 40 people every 2 hours come in. So we, a huge show of departments. On that, they gave us feedback. We responded to every single one of them. And some of them, we implemented the changes they suggested. So what that did for us, it told them, we're building an app for you, it's yours. They took ownership and they were on board with us as this app went forward. So we went live, we had no contention whatsoever. Because it was all their app, they owned it, they knew that we were trying to do this for them. CalHR is a control agency, so there's a bad light anyway. But they saw that we were collaborating with them. So that went a long way to keep stakeholders in our court. But in the end, you have to deliver something. We can talk all we want, communicate, but in the end, we had to deliver to keep them on our side.
Excellent. No, thanks very much. I really appreciate that. Before kind of opening up the Q&A to the audience here, I did want to have you try to elaborate on one point you brought up, which was the uncomfortable process, to say the least, of going through the SPR, the BCP, and eventually going up through the legislature. Mm-hmm. So would you have any advice or suggestions for the group in how to prepare for going through that process, right, in terms of getting your ducks in a row, the communication beforehand?
Yeah, you've got to have your ducks in a row.
Yeah.
You got to get everything prepared. We brought in people who have done it before. We took templates because I've never been through that. That was my first time through something like that. So we brought in templates, people who had been there. They gave suggestions. You have to be ready for every single question, because before you get to the legislatures at all, you talk to their staffers. Their staffers will grill you. So you got to have every single scenario, because they'll come at you from every angle. Because again, we're in a volatile time. There was a lot of IT projects having issues, so they knew all the questions. And we were ready, though. We were prepared. People had told us that. We had been prepped for it. We had all our ducks in a row. We were honest. We went in there being honest. Tell them we have problems, we know it, but we know we can fix it, and that's how we can get there. And they believed us. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Let me grab the mic here so we can.
Was the hearing before the SPR process or after?
After.
How long was the SPR process?
It's probably about 6 months. Yeah, it was quite a while. Yeah, it took a little bit. We had a few issues through that too. Like I said, never been through it, so we had to bring people in to help out. And the first one got rejected, then we had to go back through and do a couple adjustments. Yeah, it was quite a while. It took a little bit. But I'll tell you what, Department of Technology was great through the whole thing. They stood beside us and helped us out, and they were a huge reference for us. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, great question. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? No holds barred, right? Ask whatever you are comfortable or feel like asking. Yeah.
Question. Both of you have discussed about communications methods. What was the best method to communicate out to your stakeholders?
Ours was forums. We'd visit their forums, and we would do presentations at the forums and go to them and talk to them and invite them in. That was our best method of communication. The online forums were good to give them information, but it wasn't personable. When you get them face to face and you can talk to them and show that you care and take their needs and write them down and respond to it, and that goes a long way. That face to face to me is invaluable.
We found basically kind of like all of the above. I mean, there really wasn't, especially with an organization like DSH that's like 14,000 staff statewide. We did everything from town halls to, there were actually a group set up called Safety Coalition, which was leadership for all the different clinical disciplines and so on. And we'd have meetings with them. We even had a guy doing comic strips. And so all of our training and stuff like that was actually done in the form of PDAS man or PDAS woman and so on. So I mean, we really kind of took the approach leaving no stone unturned, So.
Great, thank you. Yeah. Any other questions? Of course, no, not at all.
So on the ECOS project, you talked about ambiguous requirements and you went back and got more from CalHR. What did you do about the requirements for the applicant side? Did you guys get any external feedback for requirements?
Yeah, so we brought in GovOps as our agency, And they had a bunch of people who brought in millennials for us to help us go that route and bring in some requirements there. So we brought them in early. And during our UAT, like I said, it's going out in January, so we're right in the middle of this right now. We brought them in there too. And we had a bunch of people complain about our job site, and they sent me emails. So I'd ask them, can I take your name and number and have you come in and help us? A lot of them said yes. We had like 20 people come in and help us out, give us requirements, what their struggles were, so.
Yep. Great. Okay. What else?
Did you guys use any kind of case management tool to subtract tickets or anything like that?
We did. We had we used primarily the portfolio management tool. We used the CA product Claire.
We used SharePoint and kind of customize it ourselves because we could tie everything together that way. I mean, everything was, I'm a programmer, so I know how to tweak some of that stuff. So we used that and had everything connected inside SharePoint.
Sorry, as far as reporting, I know that you had said after your legislature, you had to report, but as far as putting reports together, it's one of my challenges being a project manager at UC Davis. We're going with a whole new system, so we're not able to clearly define what the reporting needs are. So any kind of best cases, use cases that you guys have as far as gathering it. We kind of did a crosswalk between our current reporting needs, but we have like 5,000 of them. Only about 100 of them were actually being used consistently, and so we saw that there was a disconnect between our current needs and then what future state needs would be. Excuse me.
So as far as developing reports, not reporting like to sponsors or anything like that. Do you have anything on that?
We kind of took a different, in healthcare we're very data driven, and so we would actually embed our individuals from our data management office in each of our projects. And so we took the approach with each technology system that we were deploying. It wasn't to modernize or automate a business process, but at the end of the day for us it was really, what do you get out of it? But usually what we find is if you ask people what they want, they really don't know. And you can look at the reports if there's some sort of a legacy system, and like you'll find some of them are being used, some of them aren't. Reporting is more of, I've always found to be kind of an iterative process. So you come out with basic canned reports that meet, whatever the mandated requirements are, and operational requirements. But when you roll out any type of a new case management system, whether it's like an ERP or an EHR, you're going to find that a lot of your reporting work and analytics work and stuff is going to be about a year or so after you actually implement the system. So.
Yeah, the same here. We
Sorry, were you allowing direct access, like SQL or something like that, to be able to pull from the database?
Not the end user. I mean, with those, I was always on, and it's kind of the reason I'm in the job right now is I was always looking for something that kind of took the analyst out of the mix and IT out of the mix and put something in the hands of, your kind of program people, to actually develop graphically their own reports and so on. So, no, I mean, they wouldn't do that, but they would have tools that in the back end would do all that, so.
And normally we start from scratch. We try not to dip in the legacy system and try to figure out what their needs are, especially something that large. Starting over from scratch and figure out what they actually need, what they actually use. And like Jamie said, it's going to be iterative. I mean, you're going to find stuff down the road you didn't catch or didn't see. So we're using, on ECOS, it'll be our fourth phase is a data warehouse and the data cube. So that's kind of the idea, to give it back to the users to be able to create their own reports and not how it works. So that's kind of what we're doing. There are no direct access to SQL. The data cubes are already not too bad. That's the plan at least right now.
All right, what else? Any other thoughts from the peanut gallery? So, well, I've got a couple of follow-up questions I can pepper you guys with. Again, just kind of taking it back to the the role of the project manager. Chad, in your case in particular, where the project really had some yellow flags and then very red flags, very early on. Based on your understanding of how that went down, right? What was the role or lack of role of the project management in either having that happen in the first place, or in identifying those issues and then starting to kind of, dig yourselves out of that hole. So can you elaborate a bit on just how the project management role fit into that, the difficulties initially, and then kind of getting out of that?
Yeah, I'd say the difficulties got there because they were backing into a date and trying to make things work to a date. You really can't do that. That's how it got there. And you have to be hands-on as a project manager. You have to know what's going on. You have to be a part of everything. I think that was part of the issue. Too high level, managing 5, 10 different projects, not being hands-on on one, understanding what's happening, not going to the meetings, not seeing what's going on in QA, not seeing what's going on with the developers. So it's important to be hands-on, especially on these larger projects. You've got to be in there. To identify the issues, the project manager is the one that drove it. You have to see the flags because that's where you're at. You're at that level where the flag should be coming up to you. You should be asking the questions and seeing the issues, and then you direct the dive-ins. Your lead. You tell me what's going on. Let's sit down and talk about it for 3 hours. That's the project manager role, to be involved and be hands-on, to get through that stuff, and to guide and to lead.
Sorry, as far as scheduling, did you guys use Microsoft Project or?
Yeah.
Okay, and then also for the SharePoint, as far as your communication, was SharePoint the tool that you guys used
Absolutely.
for project management?
Yes. We came to the understanding that we did our projections at 67% of people's time. So when we did, if you're going to work on it full time, it's actually 67% of your time, because of, that's kind of an industry area. I think it's a little higher, but that gives you meetings, water cooler talks. There's going to be some of that just hanging around. So we went with the 67%, and then the rest that was our base. That's how we did our scheduling as a project manager. Yeah, we used a really good tool actually. It's called iRise, and if you didn't know the difference, it looked like a real app. I mean, it behaved like one. Drop downs, flows. It'd give you the layout of how the pages work and interact. You can click on one, take you to the page. You can do the drop downs, and you can click next, and go to next, submit. You can do logic behind it. It's pretty neat.
Mobile friendly?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I'd second that. iRise is awesome.
Yeah, iRise is really,
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
But you need to have an expert on it, because it's not the simplest thing.
Yep.
Sorry, I keep asking. Was there competing technologies as far as the lanyard deal? Because I know with our health system, we have more of a walkie-talkie.
Right. Well, the individuals basically they put together a consortium of staff that in the beginning laid out basically the functional requirements that they wanted. And one of the things that they actually said is they wanted the RFID technology that people were wearing to be bidirectional, meaning that it could receive information as well as transmit. And it really then eliminated a lot of the playing field. And so we ended up picking a product called Akaho that is a company out of Finland. And then AT&T was the prime and came in. And so that was a combination of a lot of Cisco product and so on. That's what we did.
Sorry, did you guys have an RFI process, an RFP process?
We did. We went through that, but we also used a lot of established state contracts. Since, a good portion of this project was just basically local area network infrastructure, we were able to leverage contracts like CalNet and so on. So.
All right, any other questions? Yeah, hold on, let me get to you.
Team members motivated?
I'm sorry?
How do you keep your team members motivated?
Sure.
Mine was kind of easy. Actually, our people were far too motivated. You have one of your coworkers murdered, and it kind of really takes the bar up on involvement and so on. So and there's a lot of the stuff that people did was so far above what they were asked to do. It was never once was I not amazed at the one day I was there and was picked up in a utility cart. And I thought they were taking me out to kill me somewhere, because I didn't have joking, because that's sometimes how contentious. But we were at the stage where the project was starting to be a success, and we were getting to ready to a point to do the sales, pitch to finance, showing it. And they took me back to this metal fab shop, and these guys had put together because a lot of things actually had to be manufactured on site, and they showed me this huge wall that they had created that they wanted us to show these people. And I was like, well, who told you all to make this? And they're like, well, nobody did, And I said, well, why did you make it? And they said, well, we got the alarm and we're safer, so we want the other hospitals to get it as well. And so the guy that the lanyard design was actually designed by one of the staff. And we went to him trying to basically negotiate royalty rights for and he basically signed him over to the state. So, I mean, it was, a really wild thing to watch, the selflessness, that these people would do. So we were not short of motivation.
Well, a lot of our employees went through the job hiring process, so they were pretty motivated as well. So that's very, very painful. We have a lot of synergy. We got a lot of good people that get along. So on my end too, it's really easy. We do a lot of team building stuff. We go outside and do things outside of work together. A lot of times it's a pub or something. We've done paintball and things like that. In our team meetings, I usually make a play game. They grumble at first, but by the end they love it. So that helps, like, everybody communicate, get along, become friends, and it's more of that keeps them motivated. It's the camaraderie of the team that keeps them going.
We got a few minutes left, so maybe we'll take one, maybe two more questions if there's anybody out there with a burning question. Nothing? Okay, well, I got one last question for you guys, just to kind of tie it back to the theme of the delivery summit. But both of you have hinted at this in your discussions thus far, but can you talk a little bit about the role and the importance of project sponsors in both with respect to PDAS and getting that those multiple stakeholders in the coalition with the hospitals involved, and with ECOS, again, going through that replanning session. How did you engage the executive project sponsorship, right? And what advice, suggestions would you have for the group in terms of facilitating that engagement?
I would say communication. I mean, it's just, you have to talk, discuss, tell them what's going on, be honest, as we were in ours. The sponsor needs to back you because it's their project, or the whole thing stops. So you got to get them on board. You got to talk with them. You got to bring them in early and let them understand. They're the ones that are going to go help you before the legislature, help you get your resources, help you get your money and your people. So we kept them in constant communication, kept them involved. We made sure they can make decisions, so they feel ownership. So we'd have our change control board meetings and let them make the decision whether we're going to move forward with things or not. So it's important to have them make decisions on a project so they feel a little more ownership, because if it's just a lot of reporting, I've seen them get disconnected pretty quick.
Same thing. I mean, they're pivotal, primarily because a good portion of the resources that are in your project report to these sponsors. And so unless their folks actually see their leadership standing behind a project and supporting it and so on, we call it standing the line together. I mean, it's just not going to get done. So absolutely critical. And this was primarily the executive directors of each of our hospitals, and they were great. I mean, they really were. So.
Thank you. All right. Well, if there's nothing else from the group, I'll go ahead and say thank you very much for sticking it out before the happy hour. Hope that some of this information was helpful and informative. And thank you to Jamie and to Chad for their willingness and candor to share a lot of useful information today. So again, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.